Shalom. All praise is due to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rechak Wadash. Double honors to the elect apostle, bishops, elders at Great Millstone that were well. Shalom to elect Ak out there doing this work in sincerity and truth, and not for vain glory in season and out of season. Shalom to the elect men, women, sons, and daughters of the nation of Israel, which are the men, women, sons, and daughters of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans scattered to the four corners of the earth. Shalom. I just want to bring this out. Okay, this would be Romans 8th chapter and the 19th verse. Okay. It says, for the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of the power. For the earnest expectation of the creature, which would be these other heathen nations, like the Arabs, so-called Africans, East Indians, Chinese, Japanese, Syrians, okay, Assyrians, Polynesians, the white Esau, which is a so-called white man. He ain't, he's not, he don't have no earnest expectation, He's not waiting for the manifestation of the sons of the power, because he's going to go into slavery like all the other heathen nations, but he's going to be destroyed. He's going to be mass genocided off the face of the earth. Just go to Obadiah, the first chapter, around 16th, 17th, 18th verse. Okay. But the heathen nations, the other heathen nations besides Esau, which is the so-called white man, the Arabs, East Indians, Chinese, Japanese, Africans, so forth, they're waiting for the sons of the Most High. They're waiting for the sons of the power. Okay. Which would be the Israelites. Okay. Which would be the men of the 12 tribes of Israel, starting with the elect men of the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay. They're waiting. Why? Because they're going to get a fair shake. See what the so-called white man is doing to these heathen nations right now. He's doing abominable things to them. He's poisoning the air. He's poisoning the water. All right. He goes in, he brings death and hell. He experiments on them to bring to with diseases, so he can, so the so-called white man can cultivate diseases, to then bring it out later on if they don't do what he tell them to do. So he's doing all kind of abominations to them. He's separating families through war. See, and these are the things that these are the things that the Israelite men under Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, is not going to do to these heathen nations. Yeah, they're going to go into slavery. Okay. All right. They're not going to have anything, but we're not going to do abominations to them. We're not going to go into have the other nations as slaves and then buck break them, to disrespect them before their families, before their heathen families. See, we're not going to do shit like that. We're not going to poison the air or poison the land by mining the gold or the silver, or you know what I'm saying? And here it is now, the water's poison. Now they can't even drink from the wells. We're not going to do shit like that, man. Okay? You know, you know, we're not gonna hear there's a so-called Chinese man is married to a so-called Chinese woman, and we're gonna take his woman and rape him in front of her Chinese husband, rape a Chinese woman in front of her Chinese husband. See, we're not gonna do shit like that. Okay? See, this is the things that the so-called white man does. You know? It says, for the earnest expectation of the creature, which is you see the nations, waited for the manifestations of the sons, the manifestation of the sons of the sons of power, which are you Israelite men. You know, these heathen nations, they're waiting for you to come into power. Why? Because the abominable things that the so-called white man is doing unto them, the sons of power, is not going to do it. We got laws, statutes, and commandments that Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai gave us to live by. Okay? All right? So we're not going to do none of that stuff, man. The air is not going to be poisoned. The water's not going to be poisoned. The land's not going to be poisoned. Even though they're going to be in slavery and they ain't going to have nothing. Okay? But we're not going to do those abominations unto them. Okay? You know, so they want the sons of the power, which are you Israelite men. And mind you, it said the sons. It didn't say the women. Okay? It didn't say the women of power. No, because a woman doesn't have any rulership, okay, over the man. All right? Like here in America and in Europe, you know, and in other places of the world. No, it's about the men. All right? Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is dealing with his men. All right? All right? It's not about no woman being over a man. Right? The pasture of my flock are men. That's in the scriptures, man. All right? So, yeah. These nations, you know, they, you know, because, like I said, we're not going to buck break a Hamite, which is so-called African. We're not going to buck break an Arab in front of their family. We ain't doing that abominable shit, man. We're not going to poison the air and poison the water and poison the land. Okay? You know, so they're waiting for the sons of the power, the sons of Israel. You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American, starting with the elect men of you. They're waiting for it. Okay? So let's go to another scripture. Let's go to Proverbs, 29th chapter in the second verse. I think a brother had made a video, and it's heathen women. I forget what she was, an Arab or whatever, East Indian. She was saying she can't wait to Israel to come back into power. You know, there was a couple. You know, it was some years ago. All right, 29 and 5. No, Proverbs 29 and 2. Proverbs 29 and 2. Okay. Yeah, let's read it. It says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. Yeah, man. Look at all these heathen nations now. You know, look at how the European nations, which is so-called white man, you know, the French, the Germans, the Italian, the Dutch, you know, all the European nations, America, okay, you know, look what they're doing to all the heathen nations, man. They're bringing death and destruction to them, you know. They're taking all the natural resources out of the land, you know. They're murdering their leaders who come against the European powers in America and put in puppet leaders, And then the puppet leaders, they're just living for themselves. And then their own people are suffering because of it. Because the puppet leader is for the agenda of the European nations and America. So they give the puppet, they take out the leader that's for their own people, who want to help their own people, the heathens, okay? The heathen leader that wants to help his heathen people, okay? Then they murder him and put in another heathen leader, man, you know, as a puppet, you know? And now they give him some millions of dollars and he don't spread it amongst his own heathen people, man. Now they're suffering as hell, man. They ain't got no clean water to drink. The land is poisoned because all the mining that they're doing. Okay, the water becomes poison, the air becomes poison over industry. They experiment on them, you know, with diseases. You know what I'm saying? You know, but when the righteous are in authority, who are the righteous? The nation of Israel. Okay, which are you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Okay, you're the righteous, starting with the elect of the nation of Israel, the elect of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, under the rulership of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, and our King David. Okay, all right. See, because, yeah, you know, they're going to get a fair shake. You know, we're not going to do those abominable things to them, man. All right. It says, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. Yeah, and they're mourning, man. They put them puppet leaders in there, man. Puppet leaders take all the money for themselves. They take all the money from their own people. And the people suffer, you know. You know, but, and that's why they're starving over there. Well, that's one of the reasons why they're starving over there. It's all kind of diseases over there, you know. But when the kingdom of heaven is set up, man, we ain't going to mine to get the gold out of them lands, to destroy and poison the air, land, and water. Nah. We're not going to buck break a East Indian, you know, in front of his family. No. We ain't going to do all that wicked shit, man. That abominable shit. Okay? You know? But, hey, these heathen nations are mourning. Hell, we're mourning. The nation of Israel is mourning. You know? So, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. Yeah. The nation of Israel, which are you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, we're going to rejoice, man, because we're going to be under the righteous rulership of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Okay? All right? So we're going to rejoice, you know? But now we're mourning now. Why? Because we're under the rule of the wicked. Who's the wicked? The wicked is the so-called white man. Job 9:24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Okay. Here it is, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans live in the ghettos and the slums here in America and all over the world. And the so-called white man is living in the suburbs, in the mansions, mini mansions, mega mansions, doing good. They don't have to worry about the police shooting them down. Okay? All right? You know? They don't have to worry about eating, what do you call it? Effed up foods, man. You got so-called white people, man. They eat better food, man, than you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Why? Because they got the money to do it. You know? You know? They don't have to worry about being locked up in prison houses over some trumped up charges, man. Over nothing. Okay? Oh, you took a piss in the subway. Oh, we're going to lock you up. You know? Oh, you rode your bike on the sidewalk. We're going to lock you up. You know? So-called white people don't got to deal with that, man. Okay? But the nation of Israel do. You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. You know, so, yeah, you know. These heathen nations, man, they waiting for Israel to come back into power, man. You know? And after the 1,000 years is up, as the scriptures say, I'm saying it verbatim, and they live not unto the 1,000 years. That's talking about the heathen nations, and then they're gonna get their own land, and you know they're gonna have many wives, and you know what I'm saying, you know, and the land ain't gonna be poisoned, and the air ain't gonna be poisoned, and the water ain't gonna be poisoned, ain't gonna be no GMO foods, you know, they're gonna be under the rulership of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, King David, and the rest of the nation of Israel, man. All right, you know, and we ain't gonna go and buck break them in front of their family, man. Okay. And if you don't know what buck breaking is, well, you need to go and look it up. That's when a so-called white slave master had sex with the so-called black slave in front of his family. All right? We ain't gonna do that shit, man. Okay? So I hope you've been edified, and with that, shalom.